Hello, I'm Holly. I'm a postdoc in Tom Olino's lab, and I'm just making a little tutorial to help people get started getting their experiments online using PsychoPy and Pavlovia. So here we go. Okay, so first of all, PsychoPy and Pavlovia are different things. PsychoPy is the software that you download and use locally to build and run experiments, and it's based in Python. And if you're only running tasks locally just using PsychoPy, it's totally free to use. So here, let's have a look at the PsychoPy website. You can go here to download the PsychoPy software, and just be sure you're downloading version 3 because that is the version that interfaces with Pavlovia. And here's a glance at the Pavlovia website. So just FYI, totally different things. And Pavlovia is a platform that allows you to run tasks built in PsychoPy. It allows you to run them online in a browser window. So you're going to need to make an account on this website. And while PsychoPy, the local program, is based in Python, Pavlovia is based in JavaScript. And when you move your experiment over to Pavlovia to run online, most of the translation from Python to Java is automatic, but not all of it. And we can talk more about that in the next video, but just to give you a heads up. And running participants on Pavlovia online costs a small charge, about 20 British pence or about 25 cents. But in our case, Temple has bought a site license for the year, so it won't cost us any additional funds to run participants while we're on that site license.
So let's quickly talk a little bit about PsychoPy. You're going to start building your task in PsychoPy locally on your own machine. And here's a look at the interface. There's a new experiment file with nothing in it on the top and sort of a built-out experiment on the bottom. And PsychoPy is a lot like ePrime if you've used that. It has point-and-click features called the Builder, which is what you see here. And these features allow you to build simple experiments by adding routines into the experiment's flow. The flow is the timeline of the experiment, and that's pictured at the bottom of the interface here. Within my experiment's flow, I have routines called instructions 2 and 3, bank, choice, process choice, etc. And within the routines, you can add image components, text components, keyboard response components, etc. So here I'm sort of inside the choice routine, and you can see I have 5 image components, a text component, and a keyboard response component. And you can loop through these routines a number of times using the loops feature. So here you can see the choice block loop, and that's a loop that covers 4 routines: choice, process choice, set money, and feedback. And it just loops through all of those routines in order, however many times I tell it to. And then you can see there's a loop outside of that loop as well. That's my block loop. And in addition to these point-and-click features, you can add code components, which allow you to insert bits of Python coding into your experiment. And that'll allow you to do things that you can't do in the builder, like creating a variable that keeps a running total of the money a participant has won, or sort of keeping up with someone's accuracy percentage, something like that. I've made a little Twitter thread about getting started in PsychoPy, and it has links to various other tutorials. I recommend anybody new to this go through the first few links briefly just to get a sense of what PsychoPy can do, and I'll add that link in the comments. And in particular, I highly recommend the video tutorial by the PsychoPy creator, John Pierce. That video will show you how to make a Stroop task using only the builder. So no code components, no need to write any hard code in that example. And I'll put links to both of those in the comments. But I don't want to spend too much time here talking about PsychoPy up front because A, there are already some good tutorials out there to help you build experiments locally. And B, it's really important, especially if you're relatively new to coding or new to coding in JavaScript, I think it's really important to move your experiment onto Pavlovia pretty early in the process. because you can get the whole task working locally on PsychoPy and then move it over to Pavlovia and it doesn't work. And then you have like a needle in a haystack sort of problem where you're just trying to figure out why. But if you get your task onto Pavlovia really early in the task building process, it'll help a lot with troubleshooting. So I want to kind of quickly hop over to Pavlovia.
Okay, so now we're going to open up PsychoPy, create a really simple task, save it, and sync it to Pavlovia, and then we can have a look at it on Pavlovia. So let's open up PsychoPy. And it takes a minute. So here's PsychoPy, and we want to go to View and go to Builder View. Now we see the Builder View that we're used to, and we can start to build an experiment. So here is our flow, and it's sort of already given me a routine with nothing in it. And let's say I want to change the name of this to say instructions. There we go. So I just right click that, change the name, and now it's instruction. I want to add a text component, so I click on these T's. I have a text component, and I'm going to call it text instruction or instruct. The time is 0. That means that this text is going to onset as soon as the routine does. The duration, I'm going to delete this and make it infinite. Let's make the text black. Leave it at Arial. We'll make it 0.07 and center it. And then here we can just write some literal text as long as it's pretty basic. It gets more complicated, but for basic text, you can just write press spacebar. Okay. All right, so now I have a text component that starts as soon as the routine does and goes on infinitely. So now I want to add a keyboard response component. Click that. It's called key response, but let's call it instruct response or resp. The start is 0, so it'll onset. This option to respond via the keyboard will onset as soon as the routine does. Force end of routine. If this is checked, it means as soon as one of these allowed keys is pressed, the routine will end. If it's unchecked, it won't end. But I want it to end as soon as people press the spacebar. As soon as I press the spacebar. And then I want the data file to store nothing, because this is just instructions. And then for data, I don't want to save the onset offset times because it's just instructions and it'll sort of clunk up my data file. So that looks good to me. Okay, so now I have a routine called instruction that has a text component that says press spacebar, and a keyboard response component that allows me to press spacebar and ends the routine as soon as I do. Okay, so now let's add another routine. I'm going to go to insert routine. I want a new routine, same old thing, and this one I'm going to call cat pick. All right, so now I get a little black dot. It wants to know, do I want it before instructions or after? I want it after. And let's click over to my new routine, cat pick. Okay, nothing in it. That's fine. So I want to add an image. And I'm going to call this my cat pick. So this is just the name of this component. This isn't the image file. It's just what I'm calling this image component. It's going to start right when the routine does. The duration is infinite because I'm going to, well, if I deleted it, it would be infinite, but let's make it 1.5 seconds. And for the image, I'm going to call it, well, yeah, Seymour. That's my cat's name. So
Seymour.png. Okay, so it's going to look for this image file. It's going to look for it in a parallel place to where I save this experiment. So we're going to need to add that image file in a second. The position is centered. The size, sure, we'll start with that. And that looks pretty good. And for data, again, I don't really want to save the offset times this time. Okay, and then I want to give people some instructions. So let's see, I'll just call that text2, make the duration infinite, and let's make it black. Let's make it smaller. Let's make it 06. Seems good. So for the position, I'm going to want it lower down on the screen because my picture was in the middle. So let's make it, the X is fine at 0, but for the Y, let's make it negative. I really don't remember what works, but let's make it negative 0.7. And this is going to say press X. Okay, so now I should have a cat picture, a text component, and I need to add the keyboard component to actually allow people to press X. So I'm not going to give them a lot of options here. I'm just going to let them press one thing that works. I want to store the last key. The duration's infinite. Let's change this to cat pick press. And we'll save the data. Okay, so the cat picture, everything's going to start at 0 as soon as the routine onsets, but the cat picture is only going to last 1.5 seconds, while these other things will be infinite for the length of the routine. Okay, so let's go ahead and save this. And I'm going to save it. In a new folder called cat task create. Okay, and then I'll call it cat task and save it. Okay, so I need to put that cat picture in there and call it Seymour.png. So I'm going to do that in a second. I'll put the cat picture in the same place. And but for the moment, let's go ahead and insert a loop. I want these two things to happen twice. So I want my loop to begin here, and if you kind of move, it'll move back and forth. This thing's tricky. It doesn't always go where you tell it to, so you need to check it. But let's put it here at the end, and here are the details for my loop. So I'm going to call this my block loop. Give it any name you want. Sure, let's call it my trials. You can sort of play with this and see how it changes your data file. And I want this to repeat 2 times. And I don't have any conditions here, but if you're making a complicated task, you could add a conditions file here and you can browse to insert it. Okay, so now I have a loop and we'll save it. I'm gonna save my cat pic and we'll be right back. Okay, so I made a few changes. First of all, I stored a picture of my cat in the same folder where the experimental file is stored. The experimental file is always called .psyexp, and that's the exact name I reference here in the image component, Seymour.png. I also made some changes to the Y position. I can't remember what I had before, but I kind of played with it, and I found that sort of 0.15 puts it just above the midline. which seems to work with the text that I want to display. And if I display, if I set that Y to negative 0.25, it sort of displays sort of just a little below the midline. So both of those things can appear on screen.